Welcome back to the Lazy Cosmos, where we uncover the universe's most incredible secrets without the overwhelming complexity. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most underestimated forces in the cosmos: plants. Picture Earth 3 billion years ago. No blue skies, no oxygen, just a hellish world wrapped in toxic gases where a single breath would kill you instantly. Then something extraordinary happened that didn't just change our planet. It created the possibility for every living thing you've ever seen, including you. Most people think plants are just pretty decorations in our world, but the truth is far more incredible. Plants are quantum engineers, master chemists, climate controllers, and the architects of life itself. They've been using technology we're only beginning to understand, operating with efficiency that puts our best innovations to shame. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how these seemingly simple organisms are actually running the most sophisticated life support system in the known universe. But before we begin this mind-blowing journey, do me a favor. If you're curious about the hidden forces that shape our universe and want to explore science in a way that's fascinating but never overwhelming, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The Lazy Cosmos is all about discovering cosmic truths without the cosmic headache, and trust me, what you're about to learn will completely change how you see every plant around you. Now, let's uncover how plants literally created the world as we know it. Picture Earth 3 billion years ago, and you'll see a world that would kill you in seconds. No azure blue skies stretching endlessly above. No gentle breeze carrying the sweet scent of flowers. No birds singing in lush green forests. Instead, you'd find yourself on a hellish planet, wrapped in a thick, choking atmosphere of volcanic gases. Methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon monoxide swirling in toxic clouds above a landscape of molten rock and acidic oceans. The very air that you depend on for life, oxygen, simply didn't exist. This wasn't some distant alien world. This was Earth. And it remained this way for nearly a billion years after its formation 4.5 billion years ago. The early atmosphere was fundamentally different from anything we can imagine today. Volcanic activity dominated the planet's surface, belching out massive quantities of carbon dioxide and water vapor, along with deadly cocktails of methane and ammonia. What little water existed was mostly in vapor form, creating a powerful greenhouse effect that kept surface temperatures scorching hot, despite the sun being only 70% as bright as it is today. Scientists studying the oldest rocks on Earth have found iron formations that could only have formed in the complete absence of oxygen, providing compelling evidence that our modern atmosphere is a relatively recent innovation in Earth's 4.5 billion year history. But then, something extraordinary happened that would change not just our planet, but the entire trajectory of life in the universe. Around 3.4 billion years ago, in the primordial oceans that had begun to form as the Earth cooled, a remarkable group of microorganisms was quietly evolving the most revolutionary biological technology ever invented. These tiny pioneers, which we now call cyanobacteria, developed the ability to do something that no life form had ever done before. They learned to harness the power of sunlight and use it to split water molecules, releasing oxygen as a waste product. This process, oxygenic photosynthesis, was nothing short of miraculous. While earlier forms of life had found ways to extract energy from chemicals in their environment, cyanobacteria discovered how to tap directly into the nuclear fusion reactor in our sky. They evolved sophisticated molecular machinery that could capture photons, those tiny packets of light energy, and use them to break the incredibly strong bonds holding water molecules together. The hydrogen they kept for building organic compounds, but the oxygen they simply discarded into their surroundings like toxic waste. And toxic it truly was. To understand just how revolutionary and dangerous this development was, you need to appreciate that oxygen is one of the most chemically reactive elements in the universe. It doesn't just sit quietly in the environment. It aggressively attacks and oxidizes virtually everything it touches. For the predominantly anaerobic life forms that had dominated Earth for over 1 billion years, oxygen was pure poison. These ancient organisms had evolved in a world without oxygen, and their cellular machinery was not only unprepared for its presence, but was actively destroyed by it. The chemistry of oxygen toxicity is both elegant and terrifying. When oxygen encounters organic molecules, it tends to steal electrons, creating highly reactive compounds called free radicals. These molecular vandals tear through cell membranes, destroy DNA, and shut down the delicate biochemical processes that keep organisms alive. Even today, with billions of years of evolutionary adaptation to oxygen-rich environments, our own cells must maintain sophisticated antioxidant defense systems to prevent oxygen from slowly killing us from the inside. Imagine how devastating it must have been for life forms that had never encountered this chemical warfare agent before. For hundreds of millions of years, the oxygen produced by these early cyanobacteria didn't accumulate in the atmosphere. Instead, it was immediately consumed by chemical reactions with iron, sulfur, and other elements dissolved in the oceans. Vast quantities of iron in the early oceans reacted with oxygen to form iron oxides, which precipitated out and settled to the ocean floor, creating the distinctive banded iron formations that geologists use as evidence for this ancient oxygen production. This process created a kind of a buffer system where oxygen was being produced but immediately neutralized before it could escape into the atmosphere. But biological systems have a tendency to grow exponentially when conditions are favorable, and cyanobacteria found themselves in an ideal environment. They had discovered a virtually unlimited energy source, sunlight, and they began to multiply and spread across the planet's oceans with devastating efficiency. As their populations exploded, they pumped ever-increasing quantities of oxygen into their surroundings. Eventually, around 2.4 billion years ago, something critical happened. The production of oxygen finally began to outpace its consumption by geological processes. This marked the beginning of what scientists call the Great Oxidation Event, though it might be more accurately described as the Great Oxidation Catastrophe. Over a period of several 100 million years, oxygen levels in the atmosphere rose from virtually zero to as much as 10% of modern levels. To most life on Earth, this was the equivalent of a global chemical weapons attack. The oxygen didn't just kill individual organisms, it fundamentally altered the chemistry of the planet's surface, turning a reducing environment into an oxidizing one practically overnight in geological terms. The mass extinction that followed was unlike anything in Earth's subsequent history. While we often talk about the extinction event that killed the dinosaurs, or the Permian extinction that eliminated 90% of marine species, the Great Oxidation Event may have been even more devastating. It's estimated that up to 80% of all life on Earth was eliminated during this period. Entire ecosystems of anaerobic organisms that had thrived for over 1 billion years were wiped out, their cellular machinery simply unable to cope with the new oxidizing environment. The anaerobic organisms that did survive were forced to retreat to oxygen-free environments deep in the ocean, in sediments, or in other isolated niches where they could escape the toxic effects of the new atmospheric chemistry. Many of these organisms still exist today, living in extreme environments like deep-sea vents, acidic pools, or the oxygen-depleted depths of lakes and marshes. They serve as living reminders of what Earth's dominant life forms were like before the oxygen revolution changed everything. But here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. While oxygen was initially a catastrophic poison, it also represented an unprecedented opportunity. Those organisms that could develop defenses against oxygen toxicity, or better yet, find ways to actually use oxygen in their metabolism, discovered that they had access to a form of energy production that was far more efficient than anything that had existed before. Oxygen-based respiration can produce up to 18 times more energy from the same amount of food compared to anaerobic metabolism. It was like discovering nuclear power after spending millennia burning wood. This is where the brilliant work of Lynn Margulis becomes crucial to our story. In 1967, Margulis proposed what was then considered a radical idea, that the complex cells which eventually gave rise to plants, animals, and fungi were actually the result of ancient partnerships between different types of bacteria. She suggested that sometime after the Great Oxidation Event, large anaerobic bacteria began to engulf smaller aerobic bacteria instead of digesting them. These smaller bacteria, which had evolved the ability to use oxygen for energy production, provided their hosts with protection against oxygen toxicity while gaining a safe environment and steady food supply in return. This partnership, which Margulis called endosymbiosis, was initially met with skepticism from the scientific community. Her paper was reportedly rejected by more than a dozen journals before finding a home. But the evidence eventually proved her right. The organelles in our cells called mitochondria, our cellular powerhouses that use oxygen to produce energy, still contain their own DNA, which is remarkably similar to that found in certain types of bacteria. These mitochondria are literally the evolved descendants of ancient bacteria that learned to live inside other cells, creating a biological partnership that has persisted for nearly 2 billion years. Margulis envisioned that this endosymbiotic relationship was fundamentally about survival in the new oxygen-containing atmosphere. The large anaerobic host cells were being poisoned by oxygen, while the smaller, aerobic bacterial partners had evolved the molecular machinery needed to not only survive in oxygen-rich environments, but to actually harness oxygen's chemical reactivity for energy production. Together, they created a cellular system that was more powerful and adaptable than either could have been alone. This endosymbiotic partnership didn't just solve the oxygen toxicity problem. It opened up entirely new possibilities for life on Earth. Cells with mitochondria had access to so much energy that they could grow larger, more complex, and eventually develop into the multicellular organisms we see today. Every plant, animal, and fungus on Earth is a descendant of these ancient bacterial partnerships. When you take a breath, you're using molecular machinery that evolved billions of years ago as a solution to the oxygen crisis that nearly sterilized our planet. The Great Oxidation Event also had profound effects on Earth's climate and geology that extended far beyond biology. Oxygen in the atmosphere began reacting with methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that had been helping to keep the early Earth warm. As oxygen levels rose, methane concentrations plummeted, causing global temperatures to drop dramatically. This led to what scientists call snowball Earth events, periods when ice covered the entire planet from pole to pole. These massive glaciation events may have lasted for millions of years, creating conditions so extreme that they make our modern ice ages look mild by comparison. The oxygenation of Earth's surface also led to the formation of the ozone layer in the upper atmosphere. When oxygen molecules are hit by ultraviolet radiation from the sun, they can be transformed into ozone, which absorbs harmful UV rays before they can reach the surface. This protective shield was crucial for allowing life to eventually colonize land, as the levels of UV radiation on early Earth would have been lethal to most organisms. The same oxygen that had been toxic to early life eventually became the foundation for life's expansion into new environments. Perhaps most remarkably, the oxygen revolution didn't happen just once. After cyanobacteria evolved oxygenic photosynthesis, this ability was passed on to other organisms through the same endosymbiotic process that gave us mitochondria. Some early eukaryotic cells engulfed cyanobacteria, which became the chloroplasts we see in modern plants and algae. This secondary endosymbiosis event spread the ability to produce oxygen through photosynthesis to entirely new groups of organisms, ensuring that oxygen production would continue and even accelerate throughout Earth's history. The legacy of the Great Oxidation Event is written into every breath you take and every bite of food you eat. The oxygen that fills your lungs was first produced by cyanobacteria billions of years ago, using the same basic chemical reactions that power plants today. The mitochondria in your cells that convert that oxygen into usable energy are direct descendants of the bacterial partners that learn to survive in the post-oxidation world. Even the food you eat exists because plants use oxygenic photosynthesis, inherited from those ancient cyanobacteria, to capture solar energy and convert it into chemical energy. But perhaps the most profound lesson of the oxygen revolution is how it demonstrates the interconnected nature of life and environment on our planet. The waste product of one group of organisms became the foundation for entirely new forms of life. What initially appeared to be a global catastrophe ultimately enabled the evolution of complex multicellular life. The very gas that nearly sterilized our planet eventually made possible the rich biodiversity we see today, from towering redwood forests to coral reefs teeming with life to the human brain capable of understanding this incredible history. The Great Oxidation Event reminds us that Earth's history is full of dramatic transitions that initially appeared destructive but ultimately opened up new possibilities for life. As we face our own environmental challenges today, including our own impacts on atmospheric chemistry, the story of how life adapted to and ultimately benefited from the oxygen revolution offers both sobering lessons about the fragility of existing ecosystems and inspiring examples of life's remarkable ability to innovate and adapt in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Now let's dive into the most sophisticated solar energy conversion system ever discovered, one that makes our best human technology look like a child's toy in comparison. We're about to explore the photosynthesis engine, the molecular machinery that has been quietly revolutionizing energy production for over 3 billion years, and in doing so, discover why plants are actually the most advanced quantum engineers on our planet. Let's start with what might be the most important chemical equation in the universe. 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus light energy, C6H12O6 plus 6O2. This seemingly simple formula represents photosynthesis, but hidden within these symbols is a process so elegant and efficient that it puts every human-engineered system to shame. To truly appreciate what's happening here, you need to understand that this equation describes a feat that would be equivalent to building a machine that could capture sunlight, disassemble water molecules with surgical precision, rearrange carbon dioxide into complex sugars, and release pure oxygen as a bonus, all while operating at near-perfect efficiency for billions of cycles without breaking down. The stage for this molecular magic show is set inside microscopic structures called chloroplasts, found in every green leaf around you. If you could shrink yourself down and travel inside a plant cell, you'd discover that these chloroplasts are far more complex than the most sophisticated factories humans have ever built. Each chloroplast is surrounded by a double membrane that acts like a security system, controlling what goes in and out of this biological powerhouse. But the real action happens inside, where you'll find an intricate three-dimensional maze of internal membranes called thylakoids, stacked like coins into structures called grana. These thylakoid membranes are where the first stage of photosynthesis occurs, and they contain some of the most remarkable molecular machinery ever discovered. Embedded within these membranes are protein complexes called photosystems, essentially biological solar panels that are so advanced they make our best technology look primitive. There are two main types of photosystems: photosystem I, which absorbs light at a wavelength of 700 nanometers, and photosystem II, which captures light at 680 nanometers. This division of labor allows plants to harvest a broader spectrum of sunlight than any single system could manage alone. At the heart of these photosystems lies chlorophyll, the green pigment that gives plants their color and serves as nature's version of a solar cell. But here's where the story becomes absolutely extraordinary. Chlorophyll doesn't just absorb light randomly like a simple light bulb soaking up energy. Instead, it operates using principles of quantum mechanics that we're only beginning to understand. When a photon, one of those tiny packets of light energy that Einstein described when he won the Nobel Prize for explaining the photoelectric effect, strikes a chlorophyll molecule, something remarkable happens. Einstein's groundbreaking work on the photoelectric effect in 1905 showed us that light doesn't behave like a continuous wave, as scientists had previously believed, but instead comes in discrete packets of energy called photons. Each photon carries a specific amount of energy determined by its frequency, described by the equation E equals hf, where h is Planck's constant and f is the frequency. When Einstein proposed this idea, it was revolutionary because it suggested that light had particle-like properties, not just wave-like ones. This discovery laid the foundation for quantum mechanics and earned Einstein the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. Now, here's where plants demonstrate their quantum mastery. When a photon hits a chlorophyll molecule, it doesn't just heat up the molecule or cause some random chemical reaction. Instead, the energy from that photon excites an electron in the chlorophyll molecule to a higher energy state. But plants have evolved something even more sophisticated than Einstein's photoelectric effect. They've created a quantum energy transfer system, that operates with an efficiency that borders on the impossible. Recent research has revealed that plants use quantum coherence to transfer energy through their light harvesting complexes. Quantum coherence is a phenomenon where particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously and maintain wave-like properties that allow them to explore multiple pathways at once. In photosynthesis, this means that when energy is absorbed by one chlorophyll molecule, it doesn't just hop randomly from one molecule to another like a pinball bouncing around. Instead, the energy exists in a quantum superposition, simultaneously exploring all possible pathways through the light harvesting complex until it finds the most efficient route to the reaction center. This quantum behavior allows plants to achieve energy transfer efficiencies of 95% or higher, a level of performance that would be considered miraculous in any human-engineered system. To put this in perspective, our most advanced solar panels, using the latest silicon technology, typically achieve efficiencies between 20% and 24%. Even the most efficient commercial solar panels available in 2025 top out at around 24% efficiency under ideal laboratory conditions. Plants routinely operate at efficiencies 4 times higher than our best technology, and they do it using materials that they manufacture themselves from simple ingredients like carbon dioxide and water. The quantum mechanics at work in photosynthesis becomes even more impressive when you consider the environment where it operates. Usually, quantum effects can only be observed and exploited at extremely low temperatures, close to absolute zero, where molecular motion is minimized and quantum coherence can be maintained. But plants maintain quantum coherence at room temperature in the chaotic, vibrating environment of a living cell, where thousands of different molecular processes are occurring simultaneously. This should be impossible according to our understanding of physics, yet plants have been doing it for billions of years. The secret lies in what scientists call environment-assisted quantum transport. Instead of fighting against the molecular vibrations and thermal noise that would normally destroy quantum coherence, plants have evolved to use these vibrations to actually enhance their energy transfer efficiency. The random molecular motions that would destroy quantum effects in an artificial system somehow help plants maintain just the right amount of quantum coherence to optimize energy transfer while preventing the energy from getting trapped in dead ends. The light reactions of photosynthesis occur in 2 main stages, both of which demonstrate the sophisticated engineering that evolution has achieved. The first stage involves the actual capture of light energy and its conversion into chemical energy carriers called ATP and NADPH. When light strikes photosystem 2, it energizes electrons and provides the power needed to split water molecules, a process that requires enormous amounts of energy. The splitting of water, called photolysis, is one of the most thermodynamically challenging reactions in biology. Yet plants accomplish it millions of times per second in every leaf. The electrons liberated from water are then passed through an elaborate electron transport chain, like a molecular assembly line, where their energy is captured and stored in ATP and NADPH. These molecules serve as the universal energy currency of the cell, storing the captured solar energy in chemical bonds that can be used to power other biological processes. Oxygen is released as a byproduct of water splitting. The same oxygen that you're breathing right now was produced by this process in a plant somewhere on Earth. The second stage of photosynthesis, called the Calvin cycle or dark reactions, takes place in the fluid-filled space inside the chloroplast called the stroma. Here, the ATP and NADPH produced in the light reactions are used to power one of the most important chemical processes on Earth, the fixation of carbon dioxide into organic compounds. The key enzyme in this process is called rubisco, ribulose 1,5-bisphosphate carboxylase oxygenase, and it may be the most important protein on our planet. Rubisco catalyzes the reaction that combines carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with a 5-carbon sugar called ribulose bisphosphate, ultimately leading to the production of glucose and other organic compounds. This process literally transforms inorganic carbon dioxide into the organic molecules that form the foundation of all life on Earth. Every carbon atom in your body was once part of a CO2 molecule floating in the atmosphere until a plant captured it using this process. What makes this entire system even more remarkable is its self-repairing and self-improving nature. Unlike human-made solar panels that degrade over time and eventually need to be replaced, plants continuously rebuild and optimize their photosynthetic machinery. The proteins involved in photosynthesis are constantly being broken down and reconstructed, allowing the plant to adapt to changing light conditions, repair damage from intense radiation, and even evolve more efficient variants over time. The thylakoid membranes, where light capture occurs, are arranged in a highly organized structure that maximizes light absorption while minimizing energy loss. The stacking of thylakoids into grana creates an enormous surface area packed into a tiny volume, like having thousands of solar panels arranged in the most compact and efficient configuration possible. The spaces between the grana, connected by lamellae, allow for optimal flow of materials and energy throughout the chloroplast. Perhaps most impressively, plants have also evolved sophisticated systems for dealing with excess light energy that could potentially damage their delicate molecular machinery. On bright sunny days, when more light energy is available than the plant can use for photosynthesis, specialized mechanisms kick in to safely dissipate the excess energy as heat, preventing damage to the photosynthetic apparatus. This is equivalent to having an automatic safety system that prevents solar panels from being overloaded and damaged by too much sunlight. The efficiency of photosynthesis becomes even more astounding when you consider the constraints under which it operates. Plants must capture light energy that comes in a broad spectrum of wavelengths, not the narrow, monochromatic light that would be ideal for maximizing efficiency. They must operate in constantly changing light conditions, from the dim light under a forest canopy to the blazing intensity of direct sunlight. They must function in environments with varying temperatures, humidity levels, and atmospheric compositions. Yet despite all these challenges, they maintain their remarkable efficiency year after year, decade after decade. The implications of understanding photosynthesis extend far beyond biology. Scientists and engineers are now working to create artificial photosynthetic systems that could revolutionize how we produce energy and materials. If we could build machines that operate with even half the efficiency of natural photosynthesis, we could solve many of our energy and environmental challenges. Artificial leaves that split water to produce hydrogen fuel, solar panels that use quantum effects to boost their efficiency, and bio-inspired materials that can self-repair and adapt to changing conditions are all areas of active research inspired by plant photosynthesis. Some researchers are exploring biomimetic approaches, trying to recreate the quantum coherence effects observed in plants using artificial systems. Others are working to enhance existing photovoltaic technology by incorporating lessons learned from studying plant light harvesting complexes. The discovery that plants use quantum mechanics to achieve such high efficiency has opened up entirely new fields of research at the intersection of quantum physics, chemistry, and biology. The story of photosynthesis also reveals something profound about the nature of evolution and the development of complex systems. The molecular machinery of photosynthesis didn't arise overnight. It represents billions of years of evolutionary refinement, with countless iterations and improvements, leading to the highly optimized systems we see today. This evolutionary process has produced a level of sophistication that human engineers are only beginning to appreciate and understand. Every time you look at a green leaf, you're witnessing the operation of the most advanced solar energy conversion system known to science. That leaf is simultaneously a quantum computer, a chemical factory, a self-repairing machine, and an environmental sensor, all rolled into one elegant biological package. The chloroplasts inside that leaf are processing sunlight, splitting water molecules, capturing carbon dioxide, and producing both the oxygen you breathe and the organic compounds that form the basis of the food web, all while operating at efficiencies that surpass our best technology. The photosynthesis engine represents more than just a biological process. It's a masterpiece of molecular engineering that has been quietly powering life on Earth for over 3 billion years. As we face challenges related to energy production, climate change, and sustainable technology, the lessons encoded in every green plant around us may hold the keys to building a more sustainable future. The quantum secrets of photosynthesis remind us that nature has already solved many of the problems we're struggling with today, and sometimes the most advanced technology is the one that's been growing in your backyard all along. Now, we need to talk about one of the most underappreciated jobs on our planet, a job that's been running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for billions of years without a single coffee break. Plants are Earth's ultimate carbon guardians, operating the most sophisticated atmospheric management system ever devised, and the numbers behind their work are absolutely staggering. Every single day, plants across our planet absorb an astronomical 157 petagrams of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere annually through photosynthesis. That's 157 billion metric tons, which recent research shows is 31% more than scientists previously thought. To put this mind-blowing figure into perspective, 1 petagram equals the amount of CO2 emitted by 238 million gas-powered passenger vehicles in an entire year. This means plants are essentially removing the equivalent emissions from over 37 billion cars annually from our atmosphere. Think about that. If every person on Earth drove about 5 cars simultaneously, plants would still be removing all those emissions and then some. But these aren't just impressive numbers floating in academic papers. This represents the largest carbon exchange between land and atmosphere on our planet, a process that literally determines whether our climate remains stable or spirals out of control. What makes this even more extraordinary is that scientists have been drastically underestimating plant carbon absorption for decades. The previous estimate of 120 petagrams per year had stood since the 1980s, but new research using advanced tracking of carbonyl sulfide, a compound that follows the same pathway through leaves as CO2, has revealed that plants have been working far harder than we ever imagined. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond botanical curiosity. When plants absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, they're not just feeding themselves. They're actively cooling our planet by removing the primary greenhouse gas responsible for climate change. Through photosynthesis, plants convert this atmospheric carbon dioxide into sugars for energy and growth. But crucially, they lock that carbon away in their tissues for years, decades, or even centuries. A mature oak tree, for instance, can sequester nearly 50 kilograms of CO2 annually, with some species like Douglas fir absorbing even more, up to 46.5 kilograms per year. Over an 80-year lifespan, that single oak tree will have removed over 1,270 kilograms of CO2 from the atmosphere, equivalent to the emissions from driving a typical car over 3,000 miles. When we scale this up to entire forests, the numbers become almost incomprehensible. The Amazon rainforest alone, often called the lungs of the earth, stores between 150 and 200 billion tons of carbon, making it one of the most important climate regulation systems on our planet. This represents more than a decade's worth of all global fossil fuel emissions compressed into a single ecosystem. The Amazon doesn't just store this carbon passively. Through the daily process of photosynthesis, it actively removes 1.5 billion tons of CO2 annually, while simultaneously releasing 20 billion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere. This massive biological engine is so powerful that its destruction would be equivalent to releasing over 10 years of human emissions in a relatively short period. Understanding the true scale of plant carbon storage becomes even more remarkable when you realize where all that carbon originally came from. Those fossil fuels that power our modern civilization, coal, oil, and natural gas, are essentially ancient plants that captured and stored solar energy millions of years ago. Every gallon of gasoline in your car represents approximately 90 metric tons of ancient plant matter that captured CO2 from prehistoric atmospheres. When we burn these fossil fuels, we're releasing carbon that plants painstakingly removed from the atmosphere over millions of years, returning it to the air in just a few centuries. The fossil fuels burned in just 1 year, 1997, contained more carbon than 400 times the current annual productivity of all plant life on Earth. This creates a profound irony in our relationship with plants. The same biological process that gave us the energy resources that built our industrial civilization is now working overtime to clean up the mess we've made by burning those ancient energy stores. Plants are essentially trying to undo what we've done by rapidly releasing their ancient stored carbon. But they're fighting an uphill battle against the speed of our fossil fuel consumption. Recent research has revealed something even more encouraging about this battle. Mature forests, which scientists once thought had limited capacity to respond to rising CO2 levels, are actually increasing their carbon storage as atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations rise. A 7-year study of 180-year-old English oak trees showed that when exposed to elevated CO2 levels, about 40% higher than normal, the trees increased their wood production by nearly 10%. This additional wood represents long-term carbon storage, effectively sequestering CO2 for decades or centuries rather than releasing it back to the atmosphere quickly through leaf fall or root decay. This discovery challenges previous assumptions and offers hope for mature forests as natural climate solutions. However, scientists are careful to emphasize that this is not a silver bullet for our climate challenges. We cannot simply plant enough trees to offset continued fossil fuel consumption at current rates, but mature forests clearly play a more active role in carbon sequestration than previously understood. The carbon storage capacity of plants extends far beyond just their visible above-ground parts. Forest soils represent a massive carbon reservoir that's often overlooked in discussions about plant carbon storage. In some ecosystems, particularly in northern regions near the tundra, forest soils actually contain more carbon than the trees themselves. The organic matter in these soils, decomposing leaves, dead roots, and other plant materials, represents centuries or millennia of accumulated carbon that plants have pulled from the atmosphere. In tropical rainforests, while less carbon is stored in the soil, the rapid growth and massive biomass of trees creates an enormous above-ground carbon reservoir. But plants don't just store carbon. They actively regulate Earth's climate through mechanisms that extend far beyond simple carbon absorption. Through transpiration, plants release enormous quantities of water vapor into the atmosphere, creating cooling effects that can be felt on both local and regional scales. A single large tree can transpire up to 100 gallons of water per day during the growing season. And this process doesn't just move water, it actively cools the surrounding environment. The physics behind this cooling is the same principle that makes you feel cold when you step out of a swimming pool on a windy day. As water evaporates from plant surfaces, it absorbs thermal energy from the surrounding environment, creating localized cooling effects. This transpiration-based cooling has profound implications for urban environments, where the heat island effect can make cities significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas. Research has shown that trees can reduce land surface temperatures by up to 12 degrees Celsius in European cities, with the most dramatic cooling effects occurring in regions with higher soil moisture. Studies have found that achieving at least 40% tree canopy coverage in urban areas creates cooling effects of 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, but anything less than this threshold provides minimal temperature reduction. This isn't just about comfort. In the scorching summer of 2022, when UK temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius for the first time, lack of urban tree cover contributed to over 2,800 excess deaths. The cooling effect of trees is particularly important for environmental justice, as research consistently shows that low-income communities and communities of color are disproportionately located in areas with minimal tree cover. In many cities, affluent neighborhoods enjoy extensive tree canopy, while poorer areas swelter in heat islands created by concrete and asphalt. This creates a situation where those least able to afford air conditioning are most exposed to dangerous heat, while those with greater resources enjoy natural cooling from trees. Plants also serve as the foundation of global rainfall patterns through their role in the water cycle. The Amazon rainforest doesn't just absorb carbon. It actively creates the weather patterns that sustain much of South America's agriculture. Through transpiration, the Amazon releases so much water vapor that it generates its own rainfall, creating a self-sustaining hydrological system. If significant portions of the Amazon are destroyed, rainfall patterns could shift dramatically, affecting agriculture and water supplies across the continent. Scientists estimate that complete Amazon destruction could reduce regional rainfall by up to 30%, with effects felt as far away as Argentina and Colombia. The connection between plants and climate regulation extends to their role in soil formation and erosion prevention. Plant roots don't just absorb water and nutrients, they physically hold soil together, preventing the erosion that would otherwise turn our continents into barren rock. The organic matter that plants contribute to soil through leaf fall and root decay creates the rich, carbon-storing substrates that support entire ecosystems. Without plants, our landscapes would be dominated by the kind of sterile, rocky surfaces we see on Mars. Perhaps most importantly, plants have created and maintained the chemical composition of our atmosphere itself. The 21% oxygen concentration in our atmosphere exists only because plants have been producing it for billions of years, while simultaneously removing CO2. This isn't a one-time historical event. It's an ongoing process that requires constant maintenance. If photosynthesis were to stop tomorrow, atmospheric oxygen would gradually decline as it reacted with other compounds, while CO2 would accumulate from volcanic outgassing and decomposition processes. The efficiency with which plants manage Earth's carbon cycle is remarkable when compared to human technology. While we struggle to develop carbon capture and storage systems that can operate at industrial scales, every leaf around you is part of a carbon capture system that's been running flawlessly for billions of years. Plants don't just capture carbon. They use it to build complex organic molecules while releasing oxygen as a bonus. They operate on solar power, require no external energy input, and actually improve over time through evolutionary adaptation. Modern research has revealed that plants are becoming more efficient at carbon absorption as atmospheric CO2 levels rise, a phenomenon called the CO2 fertilization effect. Higher CO2 concentrations allow plants to photosynthesize more efficiently, leading to increased growth and carbon storage. However, this effect is limited by factors like nutrient availability, water supply, and temperature, which means it won't solve our climate problems automatically. The scale of plant carbon management becomes even more impressive when you consider that plants absorb about 25 to 30% of all human CO2 emissions annually. This means that without plants, atmospheric CO2 concentrations would be rising about 40% faster than they currently are. Plants are essentially providing us with a massive subsidy, cleaning up a significant portion of our carbon pollution for free while we figure out how to reduce our emissions. As we face the challenge of climate change, understanding plants as carbon cycle guardians reveals both the magnitude of the natural systems working in our favor and the critical importance of protecting and expanding these systems. Every tree we cut down represents not just the loss of stored carbon, but the elimination of a carbon capture system that would have continued removing CO2 from the atmosphere for decades or centuries. Every forest we preserve represents a powerful ally in the fight against climate change, quietly working around the clock to stabilize our planet's atmosphere. The story of plants as carbon guardians ultimately reveals the profound interconnection between biological and geological systems on our planet. Plants don't just live on Earth. They actively create and maintain the conditions that make our planet habitable. They've transformed our atmosphere, moderated our climate, created our soils, and established the chemical cycles that support all life. Understanding this role is crucial as we work to address climate change and build a sustainable future, because it reveals that our best allies in this fight are not technological fixes we have yet to invent, but the green guardians that have been protecting our planet's atmosphere for billions of years. Here's a fact that will fundamentally change how you see your place in the universe. every single atom of carbon in your body was once floating freely in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide until a plant captured it and transformed it into life itself. Whether you consider yourself a vegetarian, carnivore, or something in between, you are essentially eating concentrated sunlight that was packaged by plant photosynthesis millions of times over. This isn't poetic metaphor. It's the literal truth of how energy flows through our planet's interconnected web of life. And it reveals that plants aren't just important to ecosystems. They are the foundation upon which every ecosystem stands or falls. The scale of this plant dominance is almost incomprehensible. An astounding 99.9% of all biomass on Earth depends either directly or indirectly on plants for its existence. This means that every breath of every animal, every beat of every heart, every thought in every brain is powered by energy that plants captured from our sun and converted into usable biological fuel. When a lion hunts a zebra on the African savanna, it's actually harvesting solar energy, that grass captured through photosynthesis, transferred to the zebra through digestion, and now flows to the lion through the food web. When you eat a hamburger, you're consuming energy from sunlight that corn and grass converted into chemical bonds, concentrated through a cow's metabolism, and delivered to your cellular machinery that will burn it for fuel in exactly the same way that early humans burned wood for warmth. This energy transfer follows what ecologists call the 10% rule, one of the most important principles governing life on Earth. When energy moves from one trophic level to the next, from plants to herbivores, to carnivores, to apex predators, only about 10% of the energy is actually transferred upward through the food chain. The remaining 90% is lost as heat through metabolic processes used for movement and daily survival activities, or simply lost as waste that organisms cannot fully digest. This means that to support just 1 kilogram of hawk in an ecosystem, there must be 10 kilograms of smaller carnivores, 100 kilograms of herbivores, and a full 1,000 kilograms of plant material. The mathematics of this energy loss are stark and unforgiving. If an ecosystem's plants capture 100,000 kilocalories of solar energy, only 10,000 kilocalories will be available to herbivores, only 1,000 kilocalories to small carnivores, and merely 100 kilocalories to top predators. This exponential energy loss explains why large predators are so rare in nature and why food chains rarely extend beyond 4 or 5 levels. After 4 to 6 energy transfers up the trophic pyramid, there simply isn't enough energy left to support another level of consumers. This is why you'll never see ecosystems with predators that hunt predators, that hunt predators, that hunt predators. The mathematics of energy transfer make such systems impossible. Understanding this energy pyramid reveals something profound about our own dietary choices and their environmental impact. When humans eat plants directly, we're operating at the second trophic level, capturing about 10% of the solar energy that plants fix through photosynthesis. But when we eat meat from animals that ate plants, we're operating at the third trophic level, meaning we're only accessing 1% of the original solar energy. This tenfold difference in energy efficiency explains why plant-based diets can theoretically support far larger human populations using the same amount of agricultural land, and why traditional agricultural societies developed primarily around plant cultivation rather than animal husbandry. The transformation from hunting and gathering to agriculture approximately 11,000 years ago represents one of the most significant revolutions in human history, and it was entirely dependent on our species learning to partner with plants. Before the Neolithic Revolution, human populations were limited by what they could hunt and gather from wild ecosystems. Archaeological evidence suggests that hunter-gatherer societies could support perhaps 4 million people across the entire planet. But the moment humans learned to cultivate crops, to deliberately plant, tend, and harvest specific plant species, everything changed. The development of agriculture wasn't a sudden breakthrough, but rather a gradual process that unfolded over several millennia. Around 14,500 years ago, people in the Fertile Crescent region of the Middle East began experimenting with wild grains, learning how they grew and developed. By 11,000 years ago, they had domesticated wheat, barley, rye, peas, lentils, chickpeas, and flax, the founder crops that would become the foundation of human civilization. These early farmers discovered that by selecting and planting seeds from the most productive plants, they could gradually improve crop yields and create more reliable food sources. This agricultural revolution created something unprecedented in Earth's history, a biological partnership between humans and plants that was mutually beneficial on a massive scale. Humans provided plants with protection, water, nutrients, and help with reproduction by deliberately planting their seeds. In return, plants provided humans with concentrated nutrition and stored energy that could support much larger, more complex societies. The surplus food production made possible by agriculture freed humans from the constant search for sustenance and allowed for the development of specialized crafts, permanent settlements, complex social structures, and eventually, the technological civilization we live in today. The numbers behind this transformation are staggering. From the 4 million humans that the planet supported through hunting and gathering 11,000 years ago, agriculture has enabled our population to grow to over 8 billion people. Today, a 2,000-fold increase made possible entirely by our partnership with plants. Every major human settlement, every city, every technological advance has been built on the foundation of agricultural surplus that plants make possible through photosynthesis. The computer you're using, the clothes you're wearing, the building you're in, all of these exist because plants capture enough solar energy to feed the complex human societies that create such technologies. But plants don't just provide the energy foundation for life. They also supply the essential building blocks that make complex life chemistry possible. Perhaps the most critical of these partnerships involves nitrogen fixation, a process that literally makes DNA and proteins possible across the biosphere. While Earth's atmosphere is 78% nitrogen gas, this nitrogen exists in a form that most organisms cannot use directly. The nitrogen atoms in N2 molecules are held together by one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature, requiring enormous amounts of energy to break. Enter one of the most remarkable partnerships in biology, the symbiosis between certain plants, particularly legumes, and nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These bacteria, primarily from the genus Rhizobium, have evolved the molecular machinery needed to break the powerful triple bond holding nitrogen gas together, converting atmospheric N2 into ammonia and other nitrogen compounds that plants can use to build amino acids and nucleotides. In return, the plants provide these bacteria with sugars produced through photosynthesis, along with a specialized root environment called nodules, where the bacteria can live and work. This nitrogen-fixing partnership is absolutely crucial for life on Earth because nitrogen is an essential component of DNA, RNA, and every protein in every living organism. Without the ability to convert atmospheric nitrogen into biologically useful forms, life would be limited to tiny populations living near the few natural sources of fixed nitrogen, such as lightning strikes and volcanic activity. The plant-bacteria partnership for nitrogen fixation has made it possible for life to colonize virtually every environment on Earth and to build the complex ecosystems we see today. The efficiency of biological nitrogen fixation is remarkable. Some plant-bacteria partnerships can fix up to 600 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year, equivalent to the nitrogen content in several tons of commercial fertilizer. Rice paddies in Southeast Asia have used the water fern azolla, which partners with nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria as a biological fertilizer for over 1,000 years. These azolla blooms can fix enormous quantities of nitrogen during the growing season, providing rice plants with the nutrients they need while requiring no external fertilizer inputs. The story of how food molecules from plants become energy in animal cells reveals the fundamental biochemical unity of life on Earth. When you eat a piece of bread, you're consuming starch molecules that wheat plants built from carbon dioxide and water using solar energy. Your digestive system breaks these complex starch molecules down into simple glucose, which enters your bloodstream and travels to cells throughout your body. Inside your cells, this glucose undergoes a series of carefully orchestrated chemical reactions: glycolysis in the cytoplasm, the citric acid cycle in the mitochondria, and oxidative phosphorylation that gradually extract the stored solar energy and convert it into ATP, the universal energy currency of life. What's remarkable is that this process is essentially photosynthesis in reverse. Plants use solar energy to combine carbon dioxide and water into glucose, storing energy in chemical bonds. Animals then break down glucose back into carbon dioxide and water, releasing the stored energy to power their biological processes. The carbon atom cycle between the atmosphere, plants, and animals in an endless loop that has been running for billions of years. Every carbon atom in your body has likely been part of this cycle countless times. Perhaps once in a dinosaur, then in an ancient fern, then in the ocean, then in a tree, and now, temporarily, in you before it continues its journey through the biosphere. This reveals something profound about the nature of life itself. We are all temporary arrangements of atoms and energy that plants have borrowed from the environment and will eventually return to it. The calcium in your bones was once in ancient seashells. The iron in your blood was forged in the heart of a dying star. And the carbon in your DNA was pulled from the atmosphere by photosynthesis. Plants serve as the biological machinery that assembles these raw materials into the complex organic molecules that make life possible. Even carnivorous plants, which seem to violate the rule that plants get their energy from sunlight, actually reinforce the fundamental role of photosynthesis in the food web. Venus flytraps, pitcher plants, and other carnivorous species still perform photosynthesis for their primary energy needs. They've evolved to digest insects not for energy, but to obtain nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients that are scarce in the nutrient-poor soils where they grow. These plants represent an elegant solution to the challenge of living in environments where traditional root uptake cannot provide sufficient nutrients, but they still depend on photosynthesis for the energy that powers their growth and reproduction. The global scale of plant primary productivity, The rate at which plants convert solar energy into biomass is almost beyond comprehension. Terrestrial ecosystems alone produce approximately 120 billion tons of organic matter annually through photosynthesis. This biological productivity varies enormously across different ecosystems, depending on factors like temperature, water availability, soil nutrients, and solar radiation. Tropical rainforests, with their abundant sunlight, warmth, and rainfall, are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, while deserts and polar regions have much lower productivity due to limiting factors like water scarcity and low temperatures. The efficiency of this global photosynthetic engine has profound implications for Earth's capacity to support life. Primary productivity sets the upper limit for how much life any ecosystem can support, because all energy for biological processes ultimately traces back to the solar energy that plants capture. Changes in primary productivity, whether from climate change, deforestation, pollution, or other factors, ripple through entire food webs, affecting every species from the smallest insects to the largest predators. Understanding plants as the foundation of the food web also reveals why biodiversity loss is such a critical concern. Each plant species has evolved unique biochemical capabilities, growing in specific environments and supporting particular communities of herbivores, pollinators, and other organisms. When plant species disappear, they take with them not just their own unique genetic heritage, but also the energy pathways and ecological relationships that support entire networks of other species. The loss of a single plant species can trigger cascading effects throughout an ecosystem, potentially leading to the collapse of food webs that have existed for millions of years. As human populations continue to grow and our technological civilization expands, we remain as dependent on plants as our hunter-gatherer ancestors were 50,000 years ago. The difference is that we now understand the biochemical and ecological mechanisms that make this dependence possible, revealing that plants are not just passive resources we harvest, but rather active partners in a biological relationship that has shaped the history of life on Earth. Every meal we eat, every breath we take, and every moment of our existence is made possible by the ancient biological technology of photosynthesis, operating in the green leaves all around us, quietly converting sunlight into the energy that powers our world. We've talked about how plants produce oxygen, capture carbon, and form the foundation of all food webs. But what we haven't explored yet is the vast array of additional services that plants provide, services so essential to our daily lives that if we had to replace them with human technology, the cost would be astronomical. Plants operate the most sophisticated environmental management system ever created, providing what economists call ecosystem services worth an estimated $179 trillion annually, nearly twice the value of the entire global economy. These services are so seamlessly integrated into our world that most people never realize they exist. Yet without them, human civilization would collapse within months. Let's start with one of the most remarkable engineering feats that plants perform every single day: water management on a planetary scale. Through a process called transpiration, plants act as biological pumps that move enormous quantities of water from the soil into the atmosphere, creating the rainfall patterns that sustain entire regions. A single large tree can transpire between 100 to 200 gallons of water per day during the growing season, and some swamp species, like bald cypress, can pump up to 800 gallons daily. To put this in perspective, that's equivalent to running 400 to 800 standard bathroom faucets at full flow for an entire day. But instead of wasting water, plants are creating the humidity and atmospheric conditions that generate rainfall hundreds or even thousands of miles away. The physics behind transpiration reveals just how sophisticated this biological water management system really is. When water evaporates from plant surfaces, it doesn't just disappear. It absorbs thermal energy from the surrounding environment through the same principle that makes you feel cold when you step out of a swimming pool. This evaporative cooling can reduce local temperatures by several degrees, creating microclimates that make entire regions more habitable. But the water doesn't stop there. Once in the atmosphere as water vapor, it travels on air currents and eventually condenses to form clouds and precipitation in distant locations. The Amazon rainforest, for example, generates approximately half of its own rainfall through this transpiration process, creating a self-sustaining hydrological cycle that influences weather patterns across much of South America. This plant-driven water cycle becomes even more crucial when we consider urban flooding and stormwater management. Modern cities, with their concrete surfaces and storm drain systems, create what engineers call urban runoff, massive quantities of water that rush toward rivers and drainage systems during heavy rainfall, overwhelming infrastructure and causing flooding. Plants solve this problem through three interconnected mechanisms that work together like a sophisticated flood control system. First, plant canopies intercept rainfall before it hits the ground, with large deciduous trees capturing over 1,000 gallons of stormwater annually in their leaves and branches, while evergreen trees can capture 2 to 3 times that amount due to their year-round foliage. This intercepted water either evaporates directly from leaf surfaces or is absorbed into the plant's tissues, meaning it never becomes runoff at all. Second, plant root systems create extensive networks of channels and porous spaces in the soil that dramatically increase the ground's ability to absorb water. Studies have shown that soils with trees can absorb 10 inches of rain per hour, compared to only 4 inches per hour for nearby areas converted to lawn. Finally, plants act as living pumps that continuously remove water from the soil through their root systems and release it into the atmosphere through transpiration. This biological pumping system operates 24 hours a day during the growing season, creating soil space for the next rainfall event. The flood control services that plants provide become absolutely critical as climate change increases the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. Traditional flood control infrastructure, concrete channels, storm drains, retention ponds, requires enormous capital investment and ongoing maintenance, yet it often fails during the most severe storms. Plants, by contrast, become more effective at flood control as they mature and their root systems expand. They operate automatically, require no external energy input, and actually improve their performance over time through growth and adaptation. But water management is just the beginning of the environmental services that plants provide. Perhaps even more impressive is their role as master engineers of soil creation and erosion prevention. Without plants, the continents would be barren expanses of rock and sand, constantly scoured by wind and water until nothing remained but sterile bedrock. Plants prevent this apocalyptic scenario through a combination of physical and chemical processes that literally create the soil that supports all terrestrial life. The physical process begins with plant roots that grow into cracks in solid rock, exerting tremendous pressure as they expand and gradually splitting even the hardest stones into smaller fragments. But plants don't just break rocks mechanically. They also wage chemical warfare against stone through the release of organic acids from their roots. These acids, particularly carbonic acid, formed when root-produced CO2 mixes with water, dissolve minerals from rock surfaces, and gradually convert solid stone into the mineral components of soil. Over thousands of years, this plant-driven weathering process transforms mountains into the fertile valleys where agriculture flourishes. Once plants have created soil, they must constantly defend it against the forces of erosion that would otherwise wash it away. Plant roots create underground networks that physically bind soil particles together, while the organic matter from dead leaves, branches, and roots creates the humus that gives soil its characteristic dark color and helps it retain both water and nutrients. Above ground, plant leaves and stems break the impact of raindrops that would otherwise dislodge soil particles, and they slow the flow of surface water that would carry soil away. The economic value of this soil protection service is enormous. In the United States alone, soil erosion costs agricultural productivity over $44 billion annually. Globally, soil degradation affects 1.5 billion people and reduces agricultural productivity by 12%. Without plants constantly creating and protecting soil, human agriculture would be impossible, and most of the Earth's surface would resemble the rocky, lifeless landscapes we see on Mars. Perhaps the most surprising ecosystem service that plants provide is their role as sophisticated air purification systems that remove not just carbon dioxide, but also a wide variety of toxic compounds from the atmosphere. NASA's groundbreaking clean air study in 1989 revealed that common houseplants could remove volatile organic compounds like formaldehyde, benzene, and trichloroethylene from indoor air. But what the researchers discovered was even more remarkable. It wasn't just the leaves doing the cleaning. The soil and root microorganisms were responsible for up to 95% of the air purification effect. This discovery revealed that plants operate as biological air filters that are far more sophisticated than any human technology. The leaves absorb airborne pollutants through their stomata, but the real cleaning happens in the root zone, where specialized bacteria and fungi break down toxic compounds and either use them as nutrients or transform them into harmless substances. This process, called phytoremediation, allows plants to clean up contaminated air and soil while simultaneously growing and producing oxygen. NASA studies showed that certain houseplants could remove up to 87% of air toxins in just 24 hours. The air purification capacity of plants extends far beyond indoor environments. Urban trees remove an estimated 711,000 metric tons of air pollution annually in the United States alone, providing air quality benefits worth $3.8 billion per year. These trees filter out particulate matter, ozone, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide from the air we breathe. A single mature tree can remove 48 pounds of CO2 annually while filtering 15,000 gallons of air every day. In cities where air pollution contributes to respiratory diseases, cardiovascular problems, and premature death, urban forests serve as critical public health infrastructure. The biodiversity support services that plants provide represent another crucial ecosystem function that underpins the stability of life on Earth. Plants don't just exist in isolation. They create the three-dimensional habitat structure that supports millions of other species. Forests alone provide habitat for 80% of amphibian species, 75% of bird species, and 68% of mammal species. About 60% of all vascular plant species are found in tropical forests, which cover less than one-fifth of Earth's land surface, but host approximately half of all known species. This habitat creation function works on multiple levels. The forest canopy creates distinct microenvironments at different heights, each supporting different communities of organisms. The understory provides different conditions than the canopy, while the forest floor creates yet another unique habitat. Plant roots create underground networks that support vast communities of soil organisms, from bacteria and fungi to earthworms and arthropods. Each plant species, through its unique chemistry, growth form, and life cycle, creates specific ecological niches that other organisms have evolved to exploit. The economic implications of biodiversity support are staggering. Over 75% of global food crops rely on animal pollinators, contributing $235 to $577 billion annually to global agricultural output. More than 50% of modern medicines are derived from natural sources, including antibiotics from fungi and painkillers from plant compounds. The loss of plant species therefore represents not just an ecological tragedy, but also the potential loss of future medicines, foods, and industrial materials that we haven't yet discovered. Plants also provide crucial cultural and psychological benefits that are difficult to quantify, but essential for human well-being. Urban green spaces reduce stress, improve mental health, and provide opportunities for recreation and social interaction. Studies have shown that people living in areas with more tree cover have lower rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems. Hospital patients with views of trees and gardens recover more quickly than those looking at concrete walls. These cultural ecosystem services are valued at approximately $36 trillion annually worldwide. The climate regulation services that plants provide extend far beyond carbon storage to include temperature control, humidity regulation, and weather pattern modification. Urban heat islands, where cities become significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas due to concrete and asphalt-absorbing heat, can be dramatically reduced through strategic tree planting. Trees and other vegetation can reduce urban temperatures by up to 12 degrees Celsius through evapotranspiration and shading. This cooling effect reduces energy consumption for air conditioning, saves money on utility bills, and prevents heat-related illness and death. Plants also regulate water quality through their role in watershed protection and water filtration. Healthy ecosystems provide 75% of global freshwater resources, with wetlands playing a key role in water purification. Plant roots and soil microorganisms filter pollutants from groundwater, while vegetation along streams and rivers prevents soil erosion and reduces sedimentation that would otherwise degrade water quality. The economic value of these water purification services is enormous. Replacing them with human-built water treatment facilities would cost trillions of dollars. Perhaps most importantly, all of these ecosystem services work together synergistically, creating emergent benefits that are greater than the sum of their parts. A forest doesn't just store carbon or provide habitat or regulate water. It does all of these things simultaneously while also producing oxygen, moderating climate, preventing erosion, and supporting biodiversity. This integration of services makes natural ecosystems incredibly cost-effective compared to human technological alternatives. The total economic value of ecosystem services, estimated at $179 trillion annually, represents nearly twice the value of global GDP. This means that the natural world is performing economic work equivalent to running two entire global economies every year. And it does so using only solar energy and the materials that nature provides freely. When we destroy forests, drain wetlands, or pave over grasslands, we're not just losing species or pretty landscapes. We're dismantling economic infrastructure that would be impossible to replace with human technology. Understanding plants as providers of ecosystem services reveals that conservation isn't just about protecting wildlife or maintaining scenic beauty. It's about preserving the life support systems that make human civilization possible. Every forest cleared, every wetland drained, and every grassland converted represents the loss of natural infrastructure that provides services essential to human survival and economic prosperity. The question isn't whether we can afford to protect these systems. It's whether we can afford not to, given that they're currently working for free to maintain the conditions that allow 8 billion people to live on this planet. Imagine a future where humans and plants work together in ways far more direct and intentional than ever before, where the ancient alliance between sunlight-capturing leaves and curious minds becomes the foundation not just for survival, but for thriving on a rapidly changing planet and beyond. As you breathe in, let's envision the coming era in which the wisdom coded in roots and chloroplasts merges with human ingenuity. A partnership that could redefine our relationship with nature, technology, and life itself. For billions of years, plants have been the subtle architects of our biosphere, performing feats of engineering and chemistry so elegant that our best scientists are just beginning to understand them. From quantum energy transfer and photosynthesis to radical climate regulation and symbiotic nitrogen fixation, every function that keeps our planet livable has roots in the plant kingdom. As climate change, population growth, and resource depletion challenge the old systems, humanity now faces a pivotal choice: ignore or degrade the green networks that support us, or actively cultivate and expand this ancient partnership. Let's begin with the world's laboratories, where some of the most exciting intersections of botany and engineering are taking place. Artificial photosynthesis, once a science fiction dream, is quickly moving toward reality. Scientists are building synthetic leaves and solar-driven molecular machines modeled directly on plants' quantum perfection. These new innovations aim to do what plants have always done: capture sunlight, split water, and create energy-rich molecules from atmospheric CO2. But if perfected, artificial photosynthesis could generate fuels, plastics, and pharmaceuticals with a fraction of current pollution or resource demands. Recent breakthroughs in materials science and nanotechnology are harnessing the quantum logic of leaves. Bio-inspired solar panels now mimic the structure of thylakoid membranes to enhance light absorption and energy transfer. Some photovoltaic researchers are testing photosynthetic proteins extracted from spinach as catalysts for ultra-efficient energy conversion, making use of the evolutionary expertise encoded in every green cell. If humanity can unlock even part of the efficiency of leaf-level energy management, sustainable power supplies, and a future without fossil fuel dependency may be within reach. Yet artificial photosynthesis is only one sector of this new plant-human alliance. The genetic revolution, now underway in agriculture, is arguably reshaping civilization at its core. As demand for food, fiber, and fuel surges, biotechnologists are developing crops that are more resilient, nutritious, and productive. Gene editing technologies like CRISPR are enabling the precise modification of plant genomes to increase drought resistance, pest tolerance, and yield. Researchers are even engineering perennial grains and nitrogen-fixing cereals, which could reduce the need for fertilizer and soil destruction on a global scale. One radical development is the growing field of carbon farming, in which crops are designed not merely for production, but for climate mitigation. These plants are bred and managed to sequester more carbon than they release, using deeper root systems, faster growth cycles, and optimized photosynthetic processes. Experimental forests and grasslands, sometimes referred to as living carbon capture facilities, are being planted from the Arctic to the tropics, each designed to lock atmospheric CO2 into stable biomass and soils. By working with plant genetics and ecosystem management hand in hand, humans may be able to counteract some of the carbon overload driving climate change. Space exploration further reveals the critical future of our green companions. On the International Space Station, in lunar and Martian habitat prototypes, plants are emerging as the key technology for sustaining human life away from Earth. Bioregenerative life support systems are being constructed around the central role of plants, recycling air, purifying water, producing food, and even regulating gravity-driven processes like root growth and leaf orientation. Experiments on the ISS have shown that wheat, lettuce, and radishes can grow in microgravity, while researchers search for optimal methods of plant care in closed-loop systems. As we set our sights on Mars and beyond, the lessons learned over billions of years of plant evolution become indispensable. Engineers are experimenting with algal bioreactors for oxygen production, hydroponic and aeroponic farming for food, and genetically modified seeds for cosmic radiation resistance. These innovations may soon allow explorers to build greenhouses on the moon that supply fresh vegetables and breathable air, or to terraform small sections of Mars with hardy, fast-growing pioneer species. In this sense, plants are not only the backbone of life on Earth, but the ticket to taking life anywhere in the cosmos. Urban landscapes are also transforming. The nature-based solutions movement is reshaping cities with green roofs, living walls, and urban forests. These not only provide cooling, water filtration, and air purification, but also boost mental health and equity. For communities most burdened by heat and pollution, trees and native plants can transform quality of life while increasing resilience to floods, droughts, and storms. New models of urban planning now center biodiversity as infrastructure, with city budgets allocated for tree planting, green corridors, and pollinator habitats. The economic dimensions of this partnership are staggering. Trillions of dollars in value accrue yearly from pollination, soil formation, flood management, and carbon sequestration, everything plants do, for free, while governments and corporations struggle with costly, engineered alternatives. Financial experts and policymakers are starting to recognize natural capital as essential for long-term prosperity. promoting investments in reforestation, ecosystem restoration, and sustainable agriculture as key components of global economic stability. Markets for carbon credits, biodiversity banking, and ecosystem services are multiplying, incentivizing stewardship and innovation aligned with planetary health. On the frontiers of medicine, research into plant biochemistry is unlocking new therapies for ailments, both old and new. Over half of all pharmaceuticals derive from plant molecules, and the search for new antibiotics, antivirals, and cancer treatments often begins in remote rainforests or alpine meadows. Advances in genomics and data mining are accelerating the identification of bioactive compounds, while synthetic biology enables their production without harvesting vulnerable species from the wild. The ethical stewardship of plant genetic diversity is now a matter of international concern, balancing the needs of innovation with conservation. Yet the future of our partnership with plants is not without peril. Species extinction rates are hundreds of times higher than historical norms, driven by habitat loss, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation. Each lost plant species may contain unique genes, chemicals, or ecological functions that we cannot recover or replace. The erosion of plant diversity threatens not just wildlife and landscapes, but the resilience of our food systems, economies, and even our health infrastructure. Climate destabilization poses a dual challenge. While higher CO2 can spur certain plant growth and agricultural productivity, extreme heat, drought, flooding, and new pests may erase those gains. Forest fires fueled by global warming destroy carbon sinks and release greenhouse gases, turning storied allies into amplifiers of ambition gone awry. Invasive species can overwhelm native flora, disrupting delicate balances that evolved over millennia. Addressing these threats requires global cooperation, science-informed policy, and a new ethic of stewardship. Education and citizen science play an expanding role in shaping the future plant-human relationship. Gardens, parks, farms, and botanical institutions become classrooms for all ages, revealing the mysteries of photosynthesis, soil ecology, biodiversity, and climate regulation. Scientists and educators are increasingly calling for ecological literacy as a core part of education, preparing new generations to see themselves not as masters over nature, but partners within it. Open source genetics, digital plant databases, and environmental sensors are democratizing access to research, inviting communities to observe, protect, and innovate. Traditional knowledge and indigenous stewardship must also be foregrounded. For thousands of years, cultures have cultivated and managed plant resources in harmony with local environments, shaping landscapes while maintaining the web of relationships that support life. Modern science now seeks to blend high-tech methods with time-honored practices, recognizing that the deepest insights sometimes come from the longest traditions. Restoration ecologists and conservationists increasingly partner with indigenous experts to recover lost landscapes, restore native plant communities, and build sustainable livelihoods. Ultimately, the future of the plant-human partnership rests on reimagining the network of life, not as something humans sit atop, but as a web in which we are continually, necessarily entangled. Plants will remain the custodians of atmospheric chemistry, climate stability, biodiversity, and health, but humans' ability to shape and sustain those outcomes through science, culture, and ethical action will determine whether the alliance prospers or diminishes. Just as a single leaf turns photons and CO2 into the breath and body of an animal. Each choice we make as societies can turn potential into reality. Will we curate gene banks and seed vaults, striving to preserve the dazzling diversity of plant life? Will we build cities that honor green infrastructure and wild places as essential assets? Will we make peace with planetary boundaries, trusting biological intelligence to show us paths towards sufficiency and resilience? In laboratories, farms, cities, wilderness, and even on distant worlds, the ancient partnership between humans and plants stands at a crossroads. The green engine of life offers us not just survival, but brilliance and abundance, if we will invest in its future as wisely and generously as it has invested in ours. In the coming decades, the fields we plant, the forests we restore, the seeds we save, the knowledge we honor, will shape the destiny not only of humanity, but of life itself. As we breathe together with the biosphere, a single, miraculous system grown from billions of years of innovation and collaboration, the future is ours to build and to grow. So the next time you pause to take a breath, consider this: that life-sustaining oxygen began its journey deep within a chloroplast, powered by a photon that traversed 93 million miles from the heart of our sun before striking a leaf and splitting a water molecule. That very photon set into motion a cascade of biochemical reactions honed by billions of years of evolution. Reactions that have fueled every heartbeat, every thought, and every movement in every creature that has ever walked, swum, or flown on this planet. From the first cyanobacteria that turned a toxic world into an oxygenated haven, to the mighty redwoods that stand as living carbon vaults, to the single delicate fern unfurling in your backyard, plants have been the unseen architects of Earth's habitability. They are the molecular alchemists who transformed light into sugar, soil into sustenance, water into weather, and carbon into complexity. Yet plants are more than ancient chemists. They are master engineers, crafting the very fabric of our world. Their roots fracture bedrock, creating the soils that nurture forests, fields, and gardens. Their leaves transmute sunlight into energy, launching the global carbon cycle that's tempered Earth's climate for eons. Their forests breathe clouds into existence. Their wetlands filter our water. Their grasses anchor continents against floods and droughts. Their flowers summon pollinators and sustain food webs that extend from microscopic bacteria to mighty whales. In every ecosystem, plants weave the habitats, resources, and feedback loops that sustain every branch of the tree of life. We live today in the legacy of this green revolution. Our lungs fill with the O2 they exhaled. Our crops grow in the soils they created. Our economies thrive on the services they provide for free: carbon sequestration, flood control, soil formation, air purification, worth an estimated $179 trillion annually, nearly twice global GDP. Our cultures and religions have venerated holy groves and sacred trees, instinctively honoring plants as sources of life's deepest mysteries. Our languages are steeped in plant metaphors: roots, branches, fruits, seeds, because we sense at an intuitive level the central role of plants in our narratives and identities. And yet, this tenure is not unassailable. We are living in a time of unprecedented planetary upheaval, driven largely by the disruption of the plant-driven cycles that underlie climate and ecology. Forests are falling at the rate of a football field every second. Grasslands are vanishing under urban sprawl. Soils erode faster than they form. Coral reefs bleach. Topsoil washes away. Species vanish before they're even named. The carbon ancient plants locked away for millions of years is now rushing into the atmosphere faster than living plants can reabsorb it. Earth is warming, weather patterns shift, oxygen minimum zones expand, deserts encroach. We face a paradox. The very systems that built modern civilization are being undermined by our own successes. Our technological prowess can drill, mine, and synthesize, but we have been slow to learn the lessons written for us in green. Yet there is hope written in chlorophyll. The future we inherit will be shaped by the choices we make now. Choices about conservation, restoration, innovation, and equity. Imagine farms that function like forests, capturing carbon in deep-rooted perennials. Cities draped in vertical gardens that filter air and cool streets. Deserts that bloom with drought-tolerant native plants. Coastlines buffered by restored mangroves. Savannas managed for both wildlife and carbon. Peatlands re-wetted to rekindle ancient carbon sinks. Picture laboratories where artificial leaves produce clean fuels, and genetic toolkits where underused orphan crops are amplified for nutrition and resilience. Envision explorers on Mars planting cyanobacteria to begin Earth's life-making miracle anew on alien soil. In every case, the blueprint comes from plants' billion-year experiment in transforming barren landscapes into living worlds. To secure this future, we must cultivate a new ethic rooted in partnership rather than dominion. We must recognize that plant diversity is the repository of solutions, genetic, biochemical, ecological, that we have yet to discover. We must respect that every species lost is a library of molecular inventions incinerated forever. We must invest in seed banks, in indigenous stewardship of ancestral forests, in agroecological practices that mimic natural cycles, in urban forestry initiatives that prioritize environmental justice. We must integrate ecological literacy into education so that every person understands photosynthesis not as a dusty biology lesson, but as the fundamental process that underpins energy, climate, and life. We must also harness science, technology, and traditional knowledge in tandem. Bioengineers and elders can collaborate to identify plant compounds with medicinal potential. Remote sensing specialists and smallholder farmers can co-develop landscape-scale monitoring systems. Architects and ecologists can co-design living buildings that breathe like forests. Policymakers and community leaders can co-create frameworks for ecosystem services markets that reward conservation. This convergence of perspectives will be our greatest strength, forging solutions that are at once cutting edge and deeply grounded in place-based wisdom. Our greatest legacy will not be skyscrapers or microchips, but whether we can sustain the green engine that sustains us. Every decision to protect a hectare of forest, to plant a street tree, to support a regenerative farmer, or to fund a coral nursery is a vote for life. An affirmation that plants and people are entwined in the same web, each dependent on the other. When we support beekeepers, we support plant reproduction. When we finance green infrastructure, we finance flood prevention. When we reduce emissions, we honor plants' centuries-long service of carbon capture. When we restore wetlands, we renew water purification. Each of these acts is a gesture of reciprocity. We repay the debt we owe to millennia of plant innovation. The moment for action is now. The crises we face, climate breakdown, mass extinction, hunger, inequality, are vast, but the potential solutions grow from the smallest seedlings. In every field, forest, and garden, the future is being written. The plant-human partnership that began when microscopic cyanobacteria first breathed oxygen into invisible oceans is entering its most critical chapter. Will we continue to degrade the green pillars of our world, imperiling our own future? Or will we rise to become gardeners of Earth, co-creators in the unfolding saga of life? Let us choose partnership. Let us follow the gentle guidance of leaves, which turns sunlight into sustenance without coercion, the unassuming roots, which fracture rock to build soil, the humble mosses, which pioneer barren fields, the ancient trees, which anchor entire ecosystems. Let us remember that every breath, every bite, every drop of water we consume is filtered, shaped, and supplied by the green understories of the planet. We owe our very existence to whose alchemy working out of sight below our feet and above our heads. Plants did not ask for a ticker tape parade when they transformed Earth's atmosphere. They quietly carried the weight of life on their microscopic shoulders. Today, as stewards of that legacy, we must carry forward their work with gratitude and determination, weaving our technologies, cultures, and policies into the living tapestry that they have spent billions of years weaving around us. If we succeed, humanity will enter an era of co-flourishing, where forests expand, soils regenerate, species rebound, and the climate stabilizes. We will pass to future generations a planet not diminished by our care, but enriched by our devotion to the silent green heroes that make life possible. In the end, the greatest adventure in human history may not be conquering distant planets or building ever taller towers, but relearning how to live within the green envelope that makes our world habitable. Every seed planted, every forest preserved, every research initiative funded, every community garden tended, every policy enacted for nature's benefit is a chapter in the story of revival. We are not separate from the green web. We are its conscious strand. Let us choose now to nurture that web, to honor the silent work of plants, and to embrace our role as active partners in the most magnificent enterprise the universe has ever known, the creation and sustenance of life on Earth. Thank you for journeying through the hidden world of plants and discovering how their quiet labor makes every breath, every meal, and every moment of life possible. If this exploration opened your eyes to the power of the green engine that fuels our planet, join our growing community at TheLazyCosmos. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive into the cosmic and the commonplace. Share your thoughts below. What leafy marvel surprised you most? And how will you honor the plants in your life today? Until next time, remember that the next time you breathe, you're part of a billion-year partnership that spans oceans, forests, and even the stars.